Welcome back to MyFinJourney. Today's guest is Christopher Salem, CEO, Business Executive Mentor, Business Acceleration Strategist at Sustainable Success Coaching and Consulting. Chris helps leaders, entrepreneurs, and sales professionals grow revenue and profit by strengthening three things most businesses underestimate: emotional intelligence, communication, and value proposition clarity. He's also a professional keynote speaker, award-winning author, radio show host, and media personality whose works have been featured across ABC, CBS, Fox, and NBC. Beyond business, Chris is the CEO and co-founder of Empowered Fathers in Action, a nonprofit that focused on strengthening father-son relationships and breaking cycles of dysfunction and miscommunication. For the MyFinJourney audience, this episode is how to better lead, how to have clearer messaging, and how to build stronger emotional intelligence that can translate into better teams, better sales, better customer experiences, stronger business outcomes. Ultimately, what we're talking about is creating more value so you can take that value and monetize. Chris, welcome to MyFinJourney.
Mustafa, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
No, it's our honor. So Chris, I want to dive in. Obviously, I mentioned a lot of different accolades. I probably moved fast. I probably skipped a lot of them. I want to understand how you got to where you are today.
Well, how I got here today is all been through, the school of hard knocks, experience. So while, I've had great mentors and great resources that I've tapped into, the greatest teacher of all has been life itself. And for me, I've been going at this for 36 years, and I've been through a lot, where I've had some really high ups and very low downs and everywhere in between. But each and every experience has taught me, humility, gratitude, and the ability to adapt to what is and to really focus on each and every day what I can control. And that is myself in terms of my communication, my behavior, my attitude, my emotions, and how I respond versus react to other people and situations, and my action, priorities that truly matter, and prioritizing and ranking them so I can value my time to manage it more effectively. Those are the things I've learned the hard way, but nonetheless learned, that has led me down a road of success, and where it's my duty and my role and duties to be that example every day and be resourceful to help others do the same.
Chris, that all sounds beautiful. But sometimes when we hear it, we don't really understand those hard knocks that you mentioned. So
Yeah,
if you don't mind, I really want to
sure.
understand
I
maybe
can
one
definitely go
example.
into that. So for me, let me give you a little context. So I grew up in a very dysfunctional home growing up. So a lot of codependency, a lot of anxiety, so to speak. And as a result of that, I had a father who was rarely emotionally there when he was there. And so I had when I was growing up, I was always seeking my father's validation. You're going to see how this plays out in my adult life and in my career. Now, as a result of not having that validation, I grew up as a very angry young man throughout my high school years, my college years. And when I became an adult, that lack of validation didn't go away. I now replaced that validation, by seeking it in other people. So this led me down a path of becoming a passive communicator, and yet an aggressive behavior. So I was a recovering passive aggressive. Because of my passive aggressive nature, while I had a hunter mentality and I was very good at getting business, I could destroy those relationships just as fast as I built them, and then have to redo them over and over again because of my passive aggressive nature. All going back to that need for validation that I didn't get growing up as a kid. Now, because I was very angry, I also struggled with 12 years of addiction, which was kind of, below the radar. It wasn't something that most people didn't know unless they knew me very, very well. And these were things that I had a lot of anxiety, a lot of frustration, lots of anger that I didn't know what to do. And that addiction was the only way I knew that I could escape, or at least temporarily. But I had a life-changing moment, and that life-changing moment came when I was 31 years old. Thank God I had not been married at that point. I got married after I went through this transformation, and That's why I have empowered fathers in action, why, I changed a way, how I raised my family and the way I grew up. But with that being said, my father, who was not very active in my life, for the last 2 years of his life, began to try to make amends with me. He was then diagnosed with stage 3B lung cancer. He hadn't smoked in years, but he had probably been around asbestos and, he was been around probably other types of things that probably had been grown inside of him. But I really think it was my dad's own self-limiting beliefs and his own upbringing because he was not treated well by his father. He only repeated the same things that he did to me and my brother because that's all he knew. Now, where that life-changing moment came is the day before my father passed. He was 56 years old at the time. And I remember him looking over at me and his eyes were barely open. He was on morphine. They were winding his body down to die peacefully. Cancer had been was all over his body at that point, in his bones. And he was talking to me, but he wasn't talking. Now, to this day, I know it sounds kind of strange. Some people might say, but maybe you were thinking he was talking to you. No, I heard every word he said, but it didn't come out of his mouth. I don't know where it came from. To this day, I still can't explain it. But I remember him saying that it was like his way of saying goodbye and saying, I just want to let you and your brother know that I always did love you. I may have not shown it the way that you wanted me to do. I only did the best I could with what I knew. And when I heard that for the first time, it like sparked something inside of me that my father didn't do this purposely. He did this. I'm not using it as an excuse for him, but he could only be what he only knew how to be, because that's what only he experienced. And it was the first time in my life I realized that no matter what deck of cards we've been dealt in life, you as an adult are always responsible for making those changes. And my father, when he parted and died the next day, ended up giving me the greatest gift I could ever imagine, because I wouldn't be here today, the man I am today, and the things I've done had I not gone through that moment. And that sparked a change in me. I immersed myself in a 12-step program to overcome my addiction to alcohol, drugs, and pornography. I immersed myself into Eastern philosophy and meditation. And I had ADHD, so my mind was always racing. So I had to learn how to be present. I had to rewire the way I think. And by doing this and doing this, working hard for 3.5 years, I was able to make these changes. But it didn't stop there. I became a consistent student in this area from even to this day. And because I've immersed myself into this area and I've utilized my experiences working with a lot of people, I became, through experience, a emotional intelligence and business communication expert, understanding how to communicate not only to myself from my inner champion rather than my inner critic, learning to let go of my self-limiting beliefs, that's need for validation, to learn to be intentional, not operating in the past and the future tied to expectations to outcomes. I focused on what I can control, and that was me, my communication to myself and others, my behavior, my attitude that's happening for me, not to me, my emotions and how I respond versus react to people in situations beyond my control, and my action in the moment to the priorities that matter, delegating what I could delegate and getting rid of anything that didn't serve me personally and professionally. And because as I did that and became an example, a resource, I became a great leader in helping people to do that for themselves, which no coincidence led me down a path of where I am today as a business acceleration strategist, executive coach, and a professional keynote breakout speaker in this area. Now I can go even deeper into other things, but at least I think that might give you a scope of where all this came from and what led to where I am, up to this point today.
I love it, Chris. I want to start by thanking you for sharing that story with us and the vulnerability. I want to dive deeper, but at the same time pivot a little bit because your expertise is in emotional intelligence, it is in communication, it is in value proposition clarity. What I want to understand from you, Chris, right now is why share that story or why share any story? Why should somebody who's very good at what they do show weakness, show adversity that they've overcome? What value does it provide for them as the speaker and us as the listener in a world where you just have to like show your best side only and we're all looking for immediate
Yeah.
gratification, etc.?
So it depends on your audience, but nonetheless, that most people that you are interacting with align with real people, people who are authentic, genuine, and not come across as that I can do no wrong, like a politician. I'm a politician. I don't do anything wrong. I've never did wrong by anyone, and only to know that it all comes out in the wash that they did, and they weren't this great human being like they said they were. But nonetheless, it's through that authenticity and transparency, because people can relate to that. That gets people to feel like they could come out of their comfort zones. They lower their guards. And that opens up that avenue for you to engage that person or people. So for me, it depends on the audience. If I'm talking to a group of high-level decision makers or some chemical engineers, and that's who in my audience, am I going to lead with a story like that? No, because that's not going to connect with them. They don't connect first on emotion. They connect on logic. So I'm going to build rapport and trust there. As we move things along, I could layer in certain things, aspects of that story, and how they can process it at that time. If I'm talking to some people-centric type personalities, people who lead with the emotion and care about who it impacts first before the results, then I can do that. So it really depends on the audience and how I'm going to share it. How I share it won't be the same as I share it to another group of people. It all comes down to the audience you're serving. But nonetheless, the authenticity is going to show that you're real. You're not a superhuman. You are going to make mistakes. And I think long term people respect that long term. I think people now are more, because of the technology and the amount of information out there, can kind of see through the fluff now and not buy into that everybody's perfect and not buy into everything they hear. They can kind of read in between the lines. So when people come across transparent and they're open, it allows you to be the same. And it, for me, builds better rapport and trust for better long-term relationships.
I hear what you're saying, and I agree. But let's say hypothetically, I didn't agree. I was reading all the business books in the world. Do you feel like a lot of the business strategists, content leaders, the books that are written, etc., I don't feel like they talk about, this type of vulnerability as a means to show authenticity. So I really want to understand from your perspective, because everyone will say be authentic, everyone will say be transparent,
Yeah.
everyone will say, connect with your client, have them know, like, and trust you, etc. But I don't think they talk about what you're talking about, and maybe how people that I know might present themselves to talk about weakness. So I really want, if you don't mind, I really would appreciate you diving a bit deeper on this point.
So here's the thing. It depends again against the audience. Usually when somebody's reading a business book, they're there reading because they want to get ahead. They want to either get ahead personally, professionally. They want to take their company to a whole new level. So they're simply looking for, what can you share with me that is going to make my challenge better to get the results I see? Plain and simple. Don't go into too much detail. Just do that. Now, if I'm very analytical and I don't lead with emotion, I'm going to want to know more details. I want to maybe see more case studies. I want to read more things that will connect the dots for me to see that if I embrace this methodology or concept, that if I can believe this will work, for this to work, this work to lead to that result, okay, I would do that. But what happens is, that's great in the perfect world or the fantasy of growing a business. Real life doesn't work that way. There are going to be situations where you're not going to be able to control other people and how they perceive what you're trying to get across to them. There could be things going on in your industry beyond your control. Tariffs are impacting your business. And so those books are not going to go into all that. They're just going to align with the macro level that, hey, if you do this, this, and this, and you can have this. That's not being transparent. If they, again, because they want you to buy in that's why you bought that book, is because now I'm going to take charge and I'm going to do all these things. But the reality is, there are other things that that they encountered along the way that worked against them, where they had setbacks, they had challenges. How did they deal with that? Did they talk about that? No. So the thing is, they're not getting the complete picture. I don't care what personality type you are. But again, a lot of the times those books are designed because they're meeting people where they are and what you want to hear. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just that in the real world, it doesn't work that way. This is why sometimes when you read books that are highly transparent, saying, Here are the highs, here are the lows. This is who I am. This is how I got there. Here's the setbacks. That a lot of times resonates with someone who's now really serious and not wants to play the long game of making something work. Most of the time, in my opinion, and again, it's only an opinion, doesn't mean people agree. But when people read what they want to hear, and there are books out there that cater to that, it's just setting them up to make them feel optimistic and motivated. But as soon as they hit that first obstacle, and it's going to happen, and it always will, and there's going to be challenges, because without challenges, you can't have opportunities. And without opportunities, you can't come up with solutions. And without solutions, you can't get results. So you have to have challenges. If you're not now talking about the challenges, you're going to have them, and now you're not going to be prepared, and you're going to maybe back out. And you're going to go back to maybe another book similar to that and see if maybe they can spin it in another way that hopefully will get you where you want to go. So for me, to me, transparency is not a weakness. It is a strength. And it's those individuals that I feel that look at both sides. When success is built, is not like a straight line. It's a bumpy road, and you're going to have ups and downs, challenges, obstacles, but it's how you respond and show up. And when you get knocked down, getting back up. Those are the things that are real. That's reality. And it's those types of sources that I feel that are going to hit the best when people are truly ready to now not hear what they want to hear, but what they require to hear. That's going to move them forward and their business.
I love that, Chris. And I feel like so far the conversation's been quite insightful. Before I pivot to my next question, maybe take a couple steps back, I wanted to pause for a second to say, if you're listening to this episode and if you're finding practical insights from what Chris is sharing, make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, but most importantly, share it with somebody else who can get value from what Chris is saying. Chris, earlier you mentioned how there was like a pre your father passing and post your father passing. There was maybe like less clarity, maybe more clarity. There was maybe an individual who was maybe passive aggressive and maybe an individual who is not or is less, passive aggressive. There was like a before state and an after state. I want to understand, Chris, from your personal development, from your financial development, from your growth as an entrepreneur business person, what did that look like maybe before, let's say 31 and maybe after 31? How did that, clarity show up in a couple different aspects of your life?
Well, one of the good things, Mustafa, is that I always had a good work ethic. I learned how to save money at an early age. I learned that from my father. So that was one good thing that, I learned as a young age. So while kids would take, they make 50 cents selling golf balls they retrieve from a reservoir. Instead of going buying a soda with it, I would put it in my piggy bank, right? I was a saver. So I learned how to do that. Now, the thing about with me, because of my ADHD, I had very racing thoughts. It was hard for me to concentrate at one thing at a time. And as a result of that, I was more likely to be distracted by shiny objects. So if I said, okay, I'm going to do this, and now I'm going 1,000 miles per hour, I'm getting results. Then all of a sudden something else comes, and now, oh, that looks good. That investment looks good, even though I'm working on this investment idea. Now I'll go over here, and then I try to do all two or all three or all four at the same time. You see, everything is energy. And if I'm doing four things at the same time, just do the math. I'm going to be focusing 25% on each one or somewhere around there. But if I'm now focused on one thing at a time in certain compartments of time, I'm 100% focused. I'm in the moment. I'm not in the past and the future or fear. So it's the fear when we're in the past and future, when we tie it to the outcome of things, the expectation. Expectations always put you into the control you can't control, other people and situations. But if I can be 100% focused in that moment to whatever I'm looking at, if it's an investment idea, I can put 100% of my brain power into that. Now I'm more likely, or less likely in this case, there could be a challenge, but now I'm less likely to miss an opportunity disguised in there. Whereas if I was operating with my old mindset, I would be oblivious to it. I would just be in the challenge. This is not working. I don't see anything way out of this. I'm going to detour from here. and go to that next shiny object. And it's the people who chase shiny objects that usually don't get far. This is why they continue to struggle, why they don't continue to build wealth. I'm not saying they can't, but not to the level of someone who's highly focused, disciplined. And these are the things that through a different way of thinking from intentions over expectations in the moment versus in the past and future where fear is reduced, that you have more clarity and focus to look at where there are opportunities to, to financially grow your wealth. And wealth comes in many different forms, not just money. It could be your time. It can be your purpose. It can be any combination thereof. It's finding that harmony. And, and obviously financial wealth is a part of that. And so those are the things that I had to learn to undo before 31 to what I now do today after 31. And now I'm approaching almost 60. So I've been doing this a while.
You look great for 60, Chris.
Thank you.
So, Chris, I hear what you're saying when you say, hey, focusing on too many things is a bad thing because it distracts you. But it feels like conventional financial wisdom is all about diversification and potentially having your eggs in multiple baskets. So help me reconcile the two differences. Is it a situation where like the business books say one thing, but what works in the real life is different? Or do you look at it maybe in a completely different light?
Well, just going back to your first thing, I'm not saying that when you look at an investment, you just look at one thing, right? You can be diversified. It's just that when you're looking at one thing at a time, you're dedicating that certain period of time to just that. You're not looking at all of them at the same time because your brain can't possibly digest that. So it's knowing, again, to be diversified, that you got to look at each one at certain times to make sure that, again, you're making a calculated decision, taking a calculated risk. And it's only going to be through calculated risk that you're going to get ahead. If you tend to be indecisive, wishy-washy, not taking major risks or just being ultra conservative, that's not going to move you ahead. I don't care if it's building your 401k or building your net worth or even getting ahead in a business. That's not going to, you got to be able to take calculated risks. And you're going to lose. Sometimes you're going to get you're going to have setbacks. You're going to lose. I've had investments where I've lost money. I've had investments where I've made a lot of money, but I have to still be in the game. I'm not throwing my money around foolishly, but I'm being focused, looking at the pros and cons, and then making a decision to follow through. And when I follow through, I jump in with 2 feet. I'm not always 1 foot in, 1 foot out, not doubting. I'm not going, not sure. I need to bounce it off 15 people before I make a decision. That was the old Chris. The Chris as of post 31 was able to do that. So when I looked at things, I just look at one thing at a time. And then, so, I am diversified, of course, but I just wanted to illustrate that point. So for me, getting back to what you said before in this question is you have to be really consistent with everything that we're saying here. This isn't something you do situationally or at certain times. This is something that you're doing every day. It's through that consistency is where things are going to, in the long run, are going to work in your favor. Even when you have setbacks, you're going to be able to turn those setbacks into gains later on. And sometimes those setbacks are necessary and you have to embrace it. You have to see it happening for you, not to you. And many times when people lose money in the stock market or make a bad investment, that's it. I'm never doing that again. And they just play it safe, protect them, and now they don't get ahead. It's not making it that, again, just throwing money at a wall and seeing what sticks. It's now, what can I be doing differently now to be better prepared? Building a stronger foundation here through EQ, being better prepared, executing on that and measuring to see what's working, what's not. I call that the 4 pillars of success.
Thanks for sharing that, Chris. Because when you initially started the answer, it felt like you were a prolific saver in your youth and you were diligent.
I was a saver and didn't really spend. While other kids were spending, I wasn't. So that can be seen like a good thing. But then again, it's not, because I was also denying myself certain pleasures that, kids would like. When you make some money, you want something nice. And I sometimes delayed that gratification a little too long. And sometimes delayed gratification is good. Don't get me wrong, it is. But nonetheless, you also gotta have harmony. You gotta live. You gotta enjoy your life. In my first 31 years, I parked my joy. There was no harmony. It was either make a lot of money and I'll enjoy my life later. No, it's now like this. It's been like this for 27, 28 years, whatever it's been now. That's how it is. Where it used to be make money, build wealth, and be miserable, and one day you'll enjoy it.
That's beautiful, Chris. Thanks for sharing that, because that transition for a lot of people is not easy. For a lot
No.
of people, when you're just saving and not investing, it's very hard to make that first investment. It feels as though you're giving up money and you're losing, control. But the
Yes.
flip side is, like, from a more logic driven place, it's like, hey, if I invest, I will make more money over time. So maybe, Chris, if you don't mind, like, help us zoom into that transition that you made and how you realized that you needed to invest logically and emotionally, if that makes sense.
Well, like I said, if you're gonna get ahead in life financially, spiritually, emotionally, physically, intellectually, environmentally, or I think I said spiritually already. I call it the 8 pillars of wellness. You got to have that alignment, right? It's like a seesaw. Seesaw never is going to be balanced on its axis point, never require an enormous amount of energy. It's going to teeter. Except we don't want to be where you're here and the other part is up here and vice versa. You want to you want to teeter. That's what a seesaw does. So the thing is, are we in alignment? So, I always have to look at, my financial decisions. How is that going to impact me emotionally for the better? How is that going to impact me physically? Now, a lot of times people will be like, well, what does money have to do with physical? Well, it could be a lot of things. We don't think directly or indirectly. A lot of times when I take care of myself physically and emotionally and spiritually, it raises my confidence. It raises my vibrational energy. Whether if you know it or not, we're all vibrating creatures. We're all vibrating at different frequencies. And so, most people, unfortunately, vibrate at a very low frequency. This is why they're not attracting more better opportunities. They get caught up more in the problems because they can't see the opportunities disguised. They're not making swift decisions. They're not taking calculated risks. They're not investing in certain things that can maybe help move their money ahead because they're playing it way too ultra safe. And sometimes, again, there are people with certain personalities that's in their DNA. There are some people who are ultra high, what I call high C, high S's on the DISC profile. They're highly analytical or they could be highly systematic. And they don't like to make swift decisions. They don't like to be in the limelight. They don't want to take calculated risks. They play it safe. And sometimes now that those very traits, while there are pros to that, of course, but there's also cons because a lot of times it could be holding you back, investing in yourself, investing in your family, investing in your long-term success in life. So sometimes we have to take those risks and we have to learn that even with those types of personalities that I said, if we're going to get ahead. Money is energy. It's how you think. I always say how you think determines how you be. How you be determines what you become. What you become determines how you do things differently. And how you do things differently will determine your results in different ways. So if we keep doing the same thing that we've been doing and it's not getting us to where we want to be financially, well, something's got to change up here first so that you be it to become it and to do things differently. Too many people are caught up in the do and have. They don't know anything about the foundation of how we think differently to be it, to become it. And being is preparing and becoming is executing. Everyone's just so caught up on the back end of executing. I just want the results. Can you just guarantee that I'm going to have the results? Here's the reality. There is nothing certain in this world and never will be. Nothing
So,
certain.
Chris,
Wait, can I just make one point, Mustafa?
sure.
One more point. In the world, there's nothing certain. It's uncertain. But here's what you got to change in the way you think. You got to speak to yourself in certainty. It's done. I generated $500,000 in my business in 2026. I'm just using that as an example. Let's just say that was the income you made. I generated $500,000 in income in 2026 in my business. Well, 2026 isn't done yet, but I'm speaking as it's already done. I speak to myself in certainty. That doesn't mean the world is certain, but the way the universe responds is in certainty in frequency, not uncertainty. Big difference. Most people do not think that way or talk to themselves that way. They speak with, I'll try, I want, I need. Those are codependent words. I doubt this will work. I'll maybe, it's all, it's, they're always giving it to the control they can't control versus bringing it back to what you can control, you. Speak in certainty, even in our uncertain world.
I love what you're saying, Chris, because this is really the whole point of the podcast, to be very clear. It's all to focus on mindset. It's all to focus on unpacking the layers and maybe what I would view as the foundation to really scaling. The problem is, Chris, from my perspective, and maybe you know better than I, maybe you have a different perspective. I'll be curious to unpack it. It feels as though people who are just starting out don't realize the power of mindset. And all of us don't know what we don't know. So whether you're successful, however you define that, or you will be successful in some future state, how does a person listening to this podcast really be hyper clear with themselves, hypercritical, and get to that point where they can understand this is the area I need to work on?
First, you got to be aware that you're not where you desire to be. You're maybe not financially where you'd like to be. You're not there professionally where you'd like to be. And instead of now blaming yourself or blaming others and blaming the world, just to accept what is. Doesn't mean that you're accepting what is where you're going to stay. It's accepting what is right now. And to say that the only thing I can change, can't change other people. I can't change situations outright. The only thing I can change in this equation is me, how I think, how I communicate, how I behave, my attitude, how I look at things happening for me, not to me, how I respond versus react to things outside of my control, other people and situations, and the action that I take. It's that consistency on a daily basis. So it starts with awareness. And now it's to say, okay, what is getting in my way of casting this doubt? Those are self-limiting beliefs from your childhood. Mine was that need for validation. Perhaps yours could the same thing. Could be something else. Maybe you're a perfectionist and everything's got to be perfect. And if it's not perfect, you can't follow through with it. You can't execute on it. You can't make that investment because nothing is perfect up to that point. These are the things that are getting away with it. How you've been taught to think growing up. And this is where, again, it's like you got to rewire your thinking. Because once you rewire your thinking to be it, to become it, to do it, and how you do that is through, again, what I just shared, learning to control what you can control you and learning to let go of what you can't. That is other people and situations. Be intentional, not operate from expectations. Meditation, walking meditation, Tai Chi, sitting meditation, guided meditation, journaling, going for a walk in a very quiet environment early in the morning, reading, developing a routine that's going to get your mind every day to be in the moment. These are ways to help you to kind of shift away from operating in the control you can't control to what you can control, to be present, not in the past and the future where fear thrives. That's what's going to help you over time, but you got to be consistent. You want to grow your muscles. You want to lose 30 pounds. It's not going to happen if you eat healthy once in a while or go to the gym once in a while. It's because you have a consistent routine of doing something that's serving you. It's the same thing in what we're talking about here. You got to be consistent and you got to take your lumps along the way and see it that it's necessary in order to uncover the opportunities disguised in them to now create solutions to get to the results you see. So I could go into deeper things of how to shift your thinking, but I just wanted to give you a macro top level view of how people could go about making those shifts.
I appreciate the macro, Chris.
Yeah.
So, Chris, were you born and raised in America? I assume
Yeah.
so.
I was born here in the US, but I can understand there are certain cultures that I'm very aware of cultures. I'm part Middle East, so I understand the Middle Eastern culture. There's the Indian culture. There's, of course, Asian culture. And some of the times those cultures have it ingrained that this is how you got to be. And a lot of times those are things that while there are pros and cons to everything, could be certain things that could be working against you. And so now you have to decide, because that's all I know. But if that's not working for you, well, you may have to be the first in your family to break that way of thinking. Like how I broke my way of thinking so I didn't repeat the same patterns my dad did with me and my brother, and how I was able to be a better father for my children as I went through this change. So you got to be the change. You can only
I love
control you.
I love that, Chris. So I guess the question I was going to ask is growing up in America, living in this American culture, it feels like there's always a hustle. It feels like there's always a strive. It feels like everyone, especially in the New Jersey, New York area where I live, it feels like everyone is always in a rush, so to speak. But it sounds like you're saying, hey, to get that inner clarity, you need to slow down. You need to exhale. You need to make sure you don't
Absolutely.
miss your exit. Help me understand from your perspective as a leader, as a coach, how have you seen people implement the idea of slowing down and being more intentional and having more clarity? And how has that actually enabled their teams to work more efficiently?
Is we talked about foundation, preparation, execution, and measurement. You got to prepare. Every day you got to plan what you're doing individually as a team, as an organization. The teams that plan and execute and measure and have that foundation we talked about are the ones that are consistently getting ahead. You look at a company like Zappos, small online shoe retailer owned by Amazon. See, Amazon was smart. They didn't disrupt their culture. Because had Amazon done that, they would have destroyed the very thing they bought that could have worked against them. They bought Zappos because they had a healthy bottom line. There's no coincidence why Zappos is ranked in the top 5 for customer service each and every year. It's because they developed a culture since its inception based upon how we think differently. It's not about selling shoes. It's about putting a smile on their customers' faces each and every day. And that starts with you. It starts with their team. It starts what happens inside that 4 walls before it filters out to the outside. If we're going to create abundance in this world, abundance for yourself, your family, it's got to start with you. And where it starts is from within. We've been trained and conditioned that wealth and all the good things in life are on the outside. They're tied to your religion. They're tied to, this political group or, you know, this community or whatever. No, it's all in here. And the only thing getting in the way of it is you because of your upbringing, your beliefs, what you've been taught to believe. You got to believe in yourself. Many people don't believe in themselves. They're seeking the truth and the beliefs and things outside of themselves. You got to reclaim your power. You got to go within. Now, a lot of the upper echelons of the world don't want to tell you that or share you with that. I'm sharing with that because I have no problem doing that. But it's got to start with you. You can't keep pointing the finger at why you're not rich, why you don't have money. You've made that decision to buy into the matrix, to buy into what way most of society lives. You got to go within and dig deep to invest in yourself. And when you invest in yourself, you can now begin to invest in things that are going to serve you financially, physically, emotionally, intellectually. Again, those 8 pillars of wellness I shared earlier that I talked about briefly. And finding that harmony, because it's about harmony. It's not about, it's never going to be like this. It's this up and down. That's a quality of life. You don't have to be the richest person in the world. You don't have to be the poorest person in the world. You don't have to be the happiest person in the world. You don't have to be the saddest. You just have to be somewhere in that middle, that contentment, gratitude, being that example, serving others through your example, resourcefulness, through empathy and kindness. It's not about pleasing, enabling, telling people what to do, sharing, be the example. Let your communication to yourself and others, your behavior, attitude, emotions, and action, let that be the example for others to do for themselves. That's what I strive to do as a leader each day. That's why I have a daily routine I do every day. I've been doing it for 28 years now. Don't ever miss a day. There's never an excuse, no matter where I'm in the world, why I can't be doing it. I do it because I know it's not only filling my bank account, it's filling even my account up here. And that is even more important than the money itself. And that's where, again, it's never going to be perfect, but I'm always working on that harmony, establishing that harmony. So you got to give. You got to give without expectation, receive without resistance. That's another thing. A lot of people have no problem giving. They often give out of pleasing and enabling. That only keeps people stuck and stagnant and dependent on you. Give through your example. Give through your resourcefulness. That's empathy and kindness. And when it comes back to you and it serves you, receive it. Don't resist it. Because when you resist it, you're denying yourself and then you're denying everybody around you that you can now give to fill their cups. That's one thing I learned 26 years ago. I've been operating that way every day of my life. And I can tell you that statement alone works and will change your life forever. Give without expectation, receive without resistance.
As a bad gift receiver, I think I'm going to have to reflect on that one a bit more. Chris, this has been a great conversation. I've loved it throughout. I feel like there's a lot of wisdom for everyone listening. If somebody is listening to this, maybe there's a sales professional, maybe they're an entrepreneur, maybe they're a C-level executive. What is the best way for them to contact you? And are there other people that you help as well?
Yeah, I work with individuals, high performers, not only in sales but CEOs, to all types of high performers, CPAs, doctors, lawyers. I work with organizations from small to mid-sized companies all the way to Fortune 500. Best way to reach me is on my two websites, sustainablesuccess.net. That's my business website. My subject matter and speaker website, ChristopherSalem.com. You can also reach me there. And you can also follow me on LinkedIn at Christopher Salem. I'm also there and love to connect and get to know you. And I'm a resource here. I'm here to give without expectation and to receive without resistance. And anything I can do to steer you in the right direction, it's always a pleasure to do that.
Awesome. So what we'll do, Chris, is we'll include those links in the show notes. Chris, once again, I've loved the conversation. It's a strong reminder that business growth isn't just about strategy. It's about communication, leadership, trust, and emotional intelligence executed consistently. Like you mentioned, a lot of that is really that clarity, perhaps slowing down, really understanding yourself, perhaps doing the hard work of really asking tough questions to then ultimately be in a position to give without expecting and to receive without resistance. For anyone listening to this episode, the takeaway is simple. If people don't understand your values, trust your leadership, or feel aligned with your mission, growth becomes much harder than it needs to be. And unfortunately, the reality is that starts with you. You need to do the work to be able to clearly communicate and efficiently gain trust and efficiently be able to communicate how you can add value and how you can give without expecting anything and receive without that resistance. If this episode has helped you, if you found something, interesting, curious, insightful, hit the subscribe button, leave a review, hit the like button, and share it with somebody who is building a business, leading a team, or trying to grow on their financial journey. Thanks again, Chris. Until next time, guys.